My daughter called me at 7 in the morning to tell me she'd sold my house, and she said it the way you'd tell somebody you'd cancel the magazine subscription. Dad, listen, I don't have a lot of time. We closed on the lake house. The money's already in. Derek and I are flying to Lisbon tomorrow, so you'll need to be packed and out by noon. The new people want it empty. I left the number for a motel on the kitchen counter. Okay? Okay? Love you. Bye. And then the dial tone. I was standing at the kitchen window with a cup of coffee going cold in my hand, looking out at Crystal Lake the way I'd looked at it every single morning for 31 years, and I remember the strangest thing happened. I didn't yell. I didn't drop the cup. I just smiled a little. The way you smile when you finally understand a joke somebody told you an hour ago. Because there was one thing my daughter didn't know. One thing she'd been too busy to ever read. And it was about to turn the best week of her life into the worst. If you've ever given everything to a child and gotten handed a bill for it, stay with me. Because you're going to want to see how this ends. And if you believe a parent's love should never be mistaken for weakness, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where in the world you're listening from. I read every one of them. My name's Raymond Calloway. I'm 68 years old, and up until that phone call, I'd have told you I was the luckiest old fool on the west side of Michigan. I built that lake house with my own two hands the year I married my wife. Diane and I were both 29, broke, half crazy in love, and we sank every dime we had into a half-acre of sandy lot outside Frankfurt with a view of the water that could make a grown man cry. I framed it myself on weekends. She painted every wall. We raised our daughter in that house. Diane taught piano in the front room for 20 years. And on a quiet evening, you could still almost hear the kids butchering fur elise while the lake turned gold outside the window. Diane passed 8 years ago. Pancreatic. It took her in 4 months, and it took the color out of the world for a good long while after. It was about a year after she died that my daughter started talking to me about getting my affairs in order. She'd sit me down at the dinner table with her husband nodding along beside her, and she'd talk about probate and estate taxes, and how complicated it all got when somebody died without a plan. She said the smart thing, the loving thing, was to get the house out of my name now while I was healthy, so the government wouldn't take half of it when I was gone. I'm not a stupid man. I ran a marina for 35 years. I know my way around a contract. But I was a grieving man, and there's a difference. A grieving man wants somebody to take care of things. A grieving man wants to believe his daughter is sitting across the table because she loves him, not because she's already spending an inheritance. So I went and saw my lawyer. Diane's lawyer, really. Nora Pruitt, who'd done our wills and watched our daughter grow up. And I told Nora I wanted to put the house in my daughter's name. What I didn't tell my daughter, what I never told anybody, was the long conversation Nora and I had behind a closed door that afternoon. Because Nora Pruitt had buried 2 husbands and seen about 400 families turn to vultures over a piece of property. And she looked at me over her reading glasses and she said, "Ray, I'll set this up however you want, but I'm going to set it up the right way. The way Diane would have wanted, and we're going to keep one thing between you and me. I'll get to that. Hold on to it." So the papers got signed. My daughter cried. She actually cried sitting in Nora's office, and she hugged me and said, "Dad, nothing changes. This is your home forever. I'm just protecting you." And God help me, I believed her. I drove home that day feeling like I'd done something wise. For the next 7 years, nothing changes slowly turned into everything changing. First, it was the visits drying up. Then it was the phone calls that only came when there was a tuition bill or a car payment or a short-term thing. "Dad will pay you right back." I gave. Of course I gave. That's what the money was for, I told myself. I gave him close to $80,000 over those years, and I never saw a nickel of it again, and I never asked. Her husband, my son-in-law, I never warmed to him, if I'm honest. He was the kind of man who measured everybody by what they could do for him. He drove a leased Range Rover and wore a watch that cost more than my first boat. And he had this habit of looking at my house the way a developer looks at an empty lot. I caught him once on the deck on his phone saying, "Yeah, water frontage. It'll move the second the old man's gone." He saw me see him, and he just smiled. I should have known then. About 6 months back, I started hearing things. My sister-in-law, Diane's sister, called me one evening sounding careful, the way you sound when you've heard something you don't believe. She said my daughter had told her at a family dinner that I was slipping, that I'd been forgetting things, that I'd left the stove on twice and gotten lost driving home from the hardware store. None of it was true. I've never left a stove on in my life, and I could drive to that hardware store blindfolded. But that's the story that was going around the family. That poor old Ray was losing his marbles, and wasn't it lucky Brooke had gotten things in her name before he got worse? She was building a case. I understand that now. She was laying the groundwork so that when she did what she was planning to do, the whole family would just shake their heads and say, well, it's for the best. He can't manage on his own anymore. What she never counted on was the conversation I'd had with Nora Pruitt 7 years before. So, that morning, the dial tone still buzzing in my ear, the coffee cold, the lake flat and silver outside the window. I'd barely set the cup down when I heard tires on the gravel. I went to the front window and there was a moving truck the size of a freight car backing up to my garage, and behind it a black SUV, and out of the SUV came my son-in-law in a golf shirt and sunglasses, with 3 men in matching shirts trailing behind him carrying flattened boxes and rolls of tape. He didn't knock. He used a key, my key, walked right into the house Diane painted, and clapped his hands like a foreman. "Morning, Ray," he said, not looking at me, scanning the room like he was pricing it. "Let's keep this moving, fellas. Anything that looks worth a damn goes on the truck. The rest goes in the bags. We're on a clock." I stepped in front of him. I'm a big man, or I was, and even at 68 I can fill a doorway. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" He finally looked at me, and he lowered his sunglasses, and he said it slow, like I was a child. "I'm clearing out a house my wife sold. You're a guest here, Ray. Be a gracious one." Then to the movers, "Start in the music room." The music room. Diane's piano. I followed them in there, and I watched a kid who couldn't have been 22 stand uncertain in front of that old upright, the one Diane had played every Sunday, and look back at my son-in-law like he was waiting to be told he'd misheard. "It's a piano," the kid said. "You want it on the truck." "It's a 100-year-old box of firewood," my son-in-law said. "Push it out to the garage. We'll have somebody haul it to the dump." He took a sip of the coffee he'd carried in from the car. "Nobody plays piano anymore." And then he saw the cigar box on top of it. That box held Diane's letters. The ones I'd written her from the marina before we married, and the ones she wrote back, tied with a ribbon that used to be red and had gone the color of old brick. He picked it up, glanced inside, saw it was paper, and dropped it into a black contractor bag with the casual flick of a man clearing junk mail. I made a sound I didn't recognize as coming from me. I reached for the bag and he stepped between me and it. "Whoa, easy, big guy," he said, one hand flat against my chest, smiling. "You'll hurt yourself. We'll get you settled at that motel and you can take whatever fits in your car. I'd grab your medications first if I were you." Behind him, the kid had started rolling the piano toward the door, and the casters caught on the threshold and the whole instrument let out this low, groaning chord, like something dying, and that sound went straight through my chest and out the other side. On the dresser in my bedroom there was a pocket watch. My father's. His father's before that. Railroad watch. Brass. The kind that doesn't keep good time anymore, but you wind it anyway because winding it is a kind of prayer. I went to get it, and my son-in-law's hand came down flat over the top of it, on the dresser, pinning it. "You won't need this where you're going," he said, soft, like it was a kindness. "Pawn shops give cash for these. Better it goes towards something useful." I looked at his hand on my father's watch. I looked at the bag on the floor with my wife's letters in it. I felt the rage come up in me so fast and so hot that for 1 second the whole room went white at the edges. And then I let it go. I want you to understand something, because it's the most important decision I made that whole week. I let it go. I took my hand off the watch. I stepped back, because somewhere in the middle of all that white heat, a cold little voice in the back of my head, Diane's voice maybe, or Nora Pruitt's, said, "Don't fight him in the house. Fight him where it counts." So I straightened up, I looked my son-in-law dead in the eye, and I felt something settle in me. Something steady and almost peaceful. "Take it," I said. "Take all of it. I hope it's worth what it's going to cost you." He laughed. He actually laughed at me and waved me toward the door like he was shooing a dog off the porch. I walked out. I didn't take a single thing. I walked down my own gravel drive past the moving truck and out to the county road, and I stood there in the morning sun and I took my phone out of my pocket. I didn't call the police. I didn't call my daughter. I scrolled down to a number I hadn't dialed in a couple of years and I pressed it, and when she picked up, I said, "Nora, it's Ray. They did it. Pull the trust file." A pause. "Yeah, the whole thing." And Nora, "Better tell the sheriff's office in Benzie County to keep their morning open tomorrow. There's going to be a closing they'll want to be at." I spent that night at the motel my daughter picked out for me. It was off the highway, the kind of place with a humming ice machine and a comforter you don't want to think too hard about. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time with the TV off. I kept thinking about a dinner the family had, must have been 2 Thanksgivings ago. My daughter stood up to give a toast, glass of wine in her hand, and she looked around the table at all the cousins and the in-laws, and she said, "To family." Because at the end of the day, family's the only investment that always pays off. Everybody laughed and clinked glasses, and I remember her husband caught her eye across the table when she said the word investment, and the two of them shared this little private smile. That's what I was to them. An investment that hadn't paid off fast enough. I called Nora once more that night, around 9. We went over everything: the deed, the trust, the closing documents her office had quietly pulled from the county recorder that afternoon. Because a property sale is public record the second it's filed, and my daughter, in her hurry, had filed everything. What my daughter had filed was a quitclaim deed, transferring all her right, title, and interest in the property to Crestline Shoreline Partners for $2.5 million, wired in full at closing 2 days before she ever called me. And here's where I have to tell you the thing I've been holding back. The thing Nora Pruitt and I kept between us for 7 years. 7 years ago, I did not put the house in my daughter's name. I thought I did. My daughter thought I did. She watched me sign papers. She cried. She hugged me sign papers. She cried. She hugged me. But Nora Pruitt, bless that sharp old woman, did exactly what she told me she'd do that afternoon behind the closed door. She set it up the right way. We put the house into a trust. The Diane Calloway Family Trust, named for my late wife. And I, not my daughter, was named the sole trustee. The deed on file at the county recorder's office didn't say my daughter's name. It said the trust owned the house and that the trustee, Raymond Calloway, had full and exclusive authority to sell it, mortgage it, or do any blessed thing he pleased with it for as long as he drew breath. My daughter? She was named the successor beneficiary, which is a fancy way of saying she inherits whatever's left in the trust the day I die. Not 1 minute before, not $1 before. The papers she'd signed that day in Nora's office, the ones she cried over, were her acknowledgement of being named successor. She never read them. She saw her own name in bold type near the front, and she filled in the rest of the story herself. Dad gave me the house. She believed it so completely for 7 years that she never once thought to actually look at what the county had on file. Why would she? She had a deed. She thought. What she had was a quitclaim deed she'd cooked up herself with some online template, transferring an interest she did not legally own. You cannot sell what isn't yours. And when you tell a buyer it is yours and you take their money for it, the law has a very old and very specific word for that. The morning of the 3rd day, I had my sister-in-law, Diane's sister, the one my daughter had been feeding all those lies about my mind going, "Drive me out to the lake." We pulled up to my own house a little after 9, and the place was a circus. There were 2 yellow bulldozers idling on what used to be Diane's wildflower garden. There was a flatbed with a construction trailer on it. A man in a hard hat with rolled-up plans under his arm, the foreman. A man in a suit who turned out to be a Crestline executive, a Mr. Drain Vance, there to oversee the start of demolition on his company's brand-new $2.5 million acquisition. And there, by the black SUV, was my daughter and her husband. They hadn't flown to Lisbon yet. They'd pushed the flight a day to watch their old life get bulldozed, I suppose, to take a photo for the memories. My daughter saw me get out of the car and her face did something complicated. Then she came marching across the gravel in heels that weren't made for it. "Dad, what are you doing here? You're embarrassing yourself. It's done. It's sold. Just go home, go to the motel. Why do you have to make everything so hard?" And right behind me, stepping out of a sensible gray sedan that had pulled in while my daughter was talking, was Nora Pruitt with a leather folder under her arm and behind her. A Benzie County Sheriff's deputy named Doyle and a second officer. My daughter saw the uniforms and stopped dead. The color went out of her face. "Why are the police here?" her voice climbed. "Dad, did you call the cops on me? You can't have us arrested for selling our own house. That's insane." The Crestline man, Mr. Vance, stepped in smooth as oil. "Officers, there must be some confusion. We have a recorded deed. We have permits. This property belongs to Crestline now. This gentleman is trespassing on a job site. I'll admit it. I'd waited 7 years and 3 days for this, and I let myself enjoy it." "You have a deed for a house," I said to him, real calm, the way I'd talk a nervous customer through a bad weather forecast. "And it's a fine house. I built it. But you didn't buy it from the person who owns it. He's lost it," my son-in-law cut in, jabbing a finger at me. "He's not well. Ask anyone in the family. He's got dementia. He doesn't even—" "Nora," I said. Nora Pruitt opened her leather folder, took out a single certified document with the Blue County Recorder's stamp on it, and handed it to Mr. Vance. "What is this?" he said. "That," I said, "is the recorded deed for this property. Read whose name is on it as the owner." He read it. I watched his lawyer brain start to work behind his eyes, and I watched the blood leave his face the same way it had left my daughter's. "It says," he said slowly, "the Diane Calloway Family Trust." "And who's the trustee?" I asked. "The fellow with the legal authority to sell?" He didn't have to look. He'd already seen it. "You are." "Me," I agreed. I turned to my daughter and I said it gently, because part of me still loved her and always will. And that was the worst part of the whole thing. "You never owned this house, honey. You never did. 7 years ago you signed a paper that made you my heir, and you decided that meant you were my landlord. You sold a house that belongs to a trust you don't control for money that wasn't yours to take. $2.5 million from these folks for something that was never yours to sell." The silence out there by the lake was a real thing. You could feel it. Even the bulldozers seemed to drop to an idle. My daughter's mouth opened and closed. No, that's not. "Dad, you gave it to me. I was there. I signed." "You signed an acknowledgement of being a successor beneficiary," I said. "You'd have known that if you'd ever once read it, but you were already spending it, weren't you? You couldn't be bothered to read the thing you were crying over." Mr. Vance was already on his phone, walking fast toward his car, saying the words "wire fraud" and "rescission" and "where is the money now" in a voice that kept rising. Crestline wanted their $2.5 million back, today, and my daughter and her husband, I happened to know, had already paid off close to $1 million in debts with it and bought first-class tickets and put a deposit on an apartment in Portugal. That's when my son-in-law made his move toward me. I don't know what he meant to do, grab the deed, maybe, or grab me. But Deputy Doyle stepped between us without a word and put a hand on his belt, and my son-in-law froze with his arm half raised. "Sir," Doyle said real even, "I need you and your wife to keep your hands where I can see them." On what charge? My son-in-law sputtered. Nora answered him because Nora had been waiting 30 years to answer somebody like him. Real estate fraud, forgery of a deed, theft by deception to start. She glanced at the deputy. Property crimes of this size in Michigan are felonies, officer. My daughter started to cry then. Not the pretty kind, the other kind. The kind that comes up from somewhere real. And for 1 second, I saw the little girl I used to carry on my shoulders down to the water to look for fish. Daddy, she said. The word she hadn't used in years. Daddy, please. We're family. You can't do this to family. Just tell them it's a misunderstanding. Sign something. You can fix this. Tell them I had your permission. Tell them it's all fine and it goes away. You can make it go away. And I'll be honest with you, sitting here now, I thought about it. I stood on my own gravel drive with a lake my wife loved at my back, and I thought about how easy it would be. One signature. I could ratify the sale, validate her authority after the fact, make the fraud disappear like it never happened. I'd lose the house, but I'd save my daughter from a prison cell. That's what a good father does, isn't it? That's what Diane would have wanted, wasn't it? I looked at the cigar box. It had fallen out of one of the contractor bags by the garage, and it was lying open in the dirt, and Diane's letters were scattered out of it, fluttering a little in the breeze off the lake. 30 years of I love you lying in the gravel where my son-in-law had thrown them. And I understood, all at once and very clearly, that my daughter wasn't sorry. She was caught. There's a difference, and at 68 I'd finally learned to tell them apart. If I signed that paper, she wouldn't learn a thing, except that the old man could always be counted on to clean up after her. She'd think she'd gotten away with it. She'd wait. And she'd do it again, bigger, the day I couldn't stop her. No, I said, just that. No, she kept begging. She brought up Diane. She brought up the grandkids. She said the word family so many times it stopped meaning anything, just a sound. A spell she thought she could say to make the consequences vanish. You keep saying family, I told her, and my voice was steadier than I expected. Where was family when you told your aunt I was losing my mind? Where was family when you put your husband's hand on my father's watch? Where was family when you sold the house your mother painted and booked a flight before the ink was dry? You didn't lose family, sweetheart. You spent it. Then now the bills come due, the same as it does for everybody else. I turned to my sister-in-law, Diane's sister, who'd been standing by the car with both hands over her mouth, watching the whole thing, watching the truth come out, that I wasn't losing my mind, that I'd never been losing my mind, that the dementia was a story my daughter invented to cover what she was about to do. My sister-in-law looked at my daughter like she was seeing her for the first time. That look, I think, was its own kind of sentence. The whole family would know by sundown. Deputy Doyle read them their rights. He did it quietly, no drama, and he cuffed my son-in-law first, then my daughter, and she didn't scream the way they do in the movies. She just went limp and kept saying, "Daddy," in this small voice, over and over, all the way to the patrol car. And I made myself stand there and listen to every single one of them because I figured I owed her that much, to not look away. When the patrol car doors shut, Nora Pruitt came and stood beside me. "Crestline's going to come after them hard for that $2.5 million, she said. "And the prosecutor's going to want felony charges. You're entitled to file your own civil suit on top of it, Ray, for the trespass, the destruction of property, the fraud against the trust. We'd win. We'd take everything they have left and the next 20 years of everything they earn." I watched the patrol car pull out onto the county road and disappear behind the dune grass. "No," I said. "Don't file anything. Let the buyers get their money back. Let the law do what the law does. But I'm not going to stand on their necks. That's the last gift I've got left to give her, that her own father didn't pile on." I looked at the lake. Let that be the thing she remembers about me, not the handcuffs, the fact that I stopped, The deputies left. Mr. Vance left, still on his phone. The construction crew loaded the bulldozers back onto the flatbed, because there wasn't going to be any demolition that day or any other day, and one by one they all drove off, until it was just me and Nora and my sister-in-law and the wind coming off Crystal Lake. I walked over to the gravel and I knelt down, slower than I used to. My knees aren't what they were. And I picked up Diane's letters one at a time and put them back in the cigar box. I found my father's watch in the dirt where it had fallen out of my son-in-law's pocket when Doyle cuffed him. I wound it. It still didn't keep good time. I put it on anyway. The house was a wreck inside, half the rooms in boxes, the piano sitting crooked in the garage. But it was standing. It was mine. It had always the whole time been mine. People ask me if I feel guilty. About the handcuffs. About my own daughter sitting in a county jail because of a paper her grandfather's lawyer filed 7 years before. And I tell them the truth, which is that I don't feel triumphant, and I don't feel guilty. I feel the way a man feels after he's set a broken bone, like something terrible and necessary just happened, and the healing, if it comes, is going to take a long, long time. I learned something at 68 that I wish I'd known at 38. Loving your children doesn't mean handing them the keys to your life and trusting they won't drive it off a cliff. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is let a grown child feel the full weight of what they've done, because that weight is the only teacher some of them will ever listen to. I spent 30 years confusing my own dignity for a thing I could give away to keep the peace. Diane never made that mistake. It just took me losing her, and very nearly losing everything else, to finally understand what she'd known all along. I still drink my coffee on the deck every morning, watching the water turn gold. The piano's back in the music room. Some evenings, if the wind's right, I swear I can still hear it. If you've ever had to choose between keeping your family and keeping your self-respect, I want to hear about it. Leave it in the comments below and tell me what you would have done out there on that gravel drive. Hit like if you believe respect is something even your own blood has to earn. And subscribe, because next week I've got another letter to read you, and you are not going to believe how this one ends. I still wind my father's pocket watch every morning, even though it runs 4 minutes slow and always will. I do it because that watch lay in the gravel of my own driveway after my son-in-law tried to pawn it, and picking it back up taught me something I'd spent 68 years getting wrong. I'd believed that love meant handing people the keys to your whole life and trusting they'd steer it carefully. Brooke proved that wrong. The truth is that nothing she did to me came out of nowhere. It came one small surrender at a time. Every check I wrote without asking a question. Every lie about my mind that I let slide. Every time I chose a quiet dinner over an honest word. Those were the bricks. She didn't wake up one morning a thief. I helped build the road she drove down, and the day the handcuffs closed on her wrists was just the last mile of it. That's the hard arithmetic of it. Causes add up to consequences whether we're watching the ledger or not. Brooke and Derek thought they were taking $2.5 million. What they were really doing was signing for every shortcut they'd ever taken, and the bill came due all at once on a Tuesday morning by the lake. If I could leave a younger man 3 things, it wouldn't be money. It would be these. Hold to a clear sense of right and wrong even when the people you love are the ones crossing the line. Because the moment you make exceptions for your own blood is the moment your blood learns there are no rules. Use your head before your heart commits you. Read the paper. Ask the question. Know what you actually own. Diane and old Nora Pruitt saved my home not with sentiment, but with foresight, with a quiet plan made 7 years before anyone needed it. And when the worst finally lands on you, find the backbone to stand in it without flinching. I stood on that gravel and listened to my own daughter say "Daddy" all the way to the patrol car, and I did not look away, because looking away would have been the coward's mercy that taught her nothing. I won't pretend it doesn't ache. It does, most nights, But there's a difference between the pain of a wound and the pain of a thing finally set right, and I've come to know that difference by heart. The piano's back in the music room now. The letters are back in their box. The lake still turns gold at sundown the way it did when Diane was alive. I gave my children everything I had, once. Now I've learned the one thing I should have kept all along, and it isn't the house. It's the spine to say no.